The poet T.S. Eliot asked the question, is there enough silence for the word to be heard? Is there enough silence for the word to be heard? I think it's a great question to ask. Can I be quiet enough to hear the word I need to hear? Can I be quiet enough to hear it? The Buddhist monk Pupjong was once invited to speak at a Catholic church in South Korea, and he began his talk about the relation between words and silence. He was making the point that the true word arises from silence. In the beginning, said the monk, there was silence. To which immediately he was interrupted. There was this response by somebody who began shouting, No, in the beginning was the Word, setting up, therefore, a possible conflict or collision between these two human beings. Except that the guy who was shouting from the pew could not find an opponent, for there was no shout back. Instead, he was met with silence. I heard this story from two South Koreans, one of whom explained to me, you can, if you'd want to, separate silence and word, there's a place for that. But our understanding is that there's no separation between word and silence, for word is silence and silence is word. There's no difference. And you found yourself believing such a point when you're with him because he spoke from his heart so clearly and gently. I felt calmed just listening to him, being in his presence, where I was finding that through his very presence, I was experiencing an eloquent, powerful word. He was word. He embodied the point he was making, which is, by the way, how I felt when I first met him. He had come towards me so quietly that I hadn't even noticed that he was standing nearby. Then, too, I'd become quiet, and really, I couldn't do otherwise in relation to his welcoming and unobtrusive presence. He was an incarnate word by his way and manner. So here's somebody I'm sure would never be in anybody's face as some kind of intrusive, space-clogging zealot. He's not someone who would ever press his point, hammer his point, anxious to change you. And therefore, there's no possibility of an argument ensuing with a man who's so quiet and gracious and so capable of creating space between himself and others. You can, however, as I was to discover, participate in a very gentle and yet intense exploration of essential matters with this man. But again, no shouting match is even possible. Now, within the Christian tradition itself, there is an understanding of the relation between word and silence. There's an understanding of the true word that issues forth from silence. At Christmas, for instance, we hear the words from the Bible and the Christian liturgy. When peaceful silence lay over all, and night had run the half of her swift course, down from the heavens, from the royal throne, leapt your all-powerful word. It's apparent that immense silence prepared the way for the word to be expressed. Otherwise, without that prior preparatory silence, what kind of word would have leapt forth from the skies? Words of comfort and joy? Probably not. For after all, when you think about it, how do any words sound that are disconnected from silence? What are words like when there's no silence built into them? Well, the answer is that words that are unshaped or uninformed by silence are likely to be sort of harsh and jarring. You could well be walloped by such words and sent reeling from these barren words, needing time to recover from the onslaught. Words that are not created by silence may feel like a shout and a blast from heaven, as like the iron-fisted approach of any religious or indeed secular fanatic who is no friend of silence. And so therefore, in light of these reflections, does the divine word have to resemble the angry tone of the dreadfully earnest preacher who shouts, "At our church, we preach the word"? I've always wondered what exactly these preachers are going on about. What are they at pains to stress? I've never quite understood the threatening pose they take. Are these pulpit thumpers hoping that I'll become as angry as they appear to be? Are they hoping that I will join with them angrily to shout from the rooftops the word of the Lord? I've never understood these ones who thunder forth as if they're the only ones who are uniquely preaching the word. But I know how I feel when I hear one of them. I feel shut down. I feel oppressed. I can think of lots of synonyms for how I feel in that kind of context, and I've been in those contexts. And I know that where their flocks gather, there's no room or space for inquiry. There's no real conversation. There's certainly never any silence, nor is there any room or space for slow growth. Everything is an urgent matter. The requirement is a speedy conformity. That's what the order of the day is. I'd like, therefore, to ask the question, in light of these reflections, what is meant by the word anyway? Like, might there be other definitions than those given by men who seem to be at war with silence? I mean, what about the possible understanding of the word, another definition of the word, as a sonorous word, like a singing word? I mean, for myself, I feel thrilled to contemplate that the creation was sung into being. In the beginning, according to this understanding, there was quiet. Yes, there was quiet. And then a melody flashed forth, like the songs of the birds emerging from silence as the dawn breaks. Well, it's just so according to the Gayatri Mantra, where it's said that the word sings forth and this whole universe comes to be. Well, such an understanding, says the great philosopher Raymond Panikkar, is at the heart of Indic, Chinese, Jewish, Christian, Germanic, African, and other traditions. The understanding is that the ultimate nature of reality is a sonorous, sensible, and rhythmic word. The creation is thought to be a rhythmic flowing forth, and not random or disorderly. Rather, God's expression of himself was and is an ordered flowing and has a rhythmic structure, which is to say there was a relation and a rhythm between silence and the word right from the beginning. Where, in light of, again, of these reflections, where we might find today those human beings whose way of life is a kind of rhythmic re-expression of creation, as they listen to the silence before speaking, and who continue to listen after they open their mouths. Perhaps it may be time to reintroduce the old practice of speaking only when one is in the presence of God. And if not, to be quiet. Secondly, it may be time to introduce the practice of pausing for a moment and actually uttering a prayer before a meal is eaten. I mean, you're affirming then that essential silent dimension that, when that's affirmed by a prayer prior to the meal, can alter the quality of sharing a meal together. Or thirdly, it may be time to reintroduce the practice of lighting a lamp before a speech is given, like just to pause for a moment, light the lamp, pray for illumination. And fourthly, it may be time to reintroduce the practice of greeting each other with a divine name at the beginning of an encounter, like blessing the time together. Well, these practices, largely discarded, point that Panikkar makes in his book, The Rhythm of Being. He says these practices point to an intuition. He says they point to an intuition that a preliminary, sacred, meditative silence needs to be entered before words are spoken. But as Panikkar states, people are rarely conscious of this dimension, this presence, and do not, therefore, experience this power and freedom and dignity. Why? Because they've allowed language to become so corrupt that it has become only a means of exchanging information in order to do or to know this or that. Our language, he says, no longer witnesses or creates because we have exiled words from the realm of silence. We have exiled words from the realm of silence. So by ignoring the dimension of silence, we have become so narrow and rigid that we no longer can hear the sound of the living word. When, however, upon becoming quiet, taking time to calm the mind, to be in the silence, if I can become quiet enough to listen, I'm able then to experience the symphonic harmony of silence and word at the heart of reality. And as that practice of silence deepens, there'll become an increasing intimacy with the immensity of that wondrous rhythm of silence and word that is there, like sort of pulsating at the heart of reality. More and more familiar with this meditative silence, I may become, over time, in the words of George Steiner, an admirably silent sea ready for the wonder of the world. I may become, over time, an admirably silent sea waiting for the wonder of the word. As I befriend the silence, she becomes like my best friend. She becomes Sister Silence.